Now, many of you may be wondering who that woman is and why she is weeping. You may also be freaked out, but these questions will be answered further into my presentation. Today, I will be discussing the urban legend of La Llorona. While I only focus on one version of this legend, La Llorona is not a simple folktale belonging to one culture, but is seen throughout many different cultures and countries. According to an article from the History Today magazine, which was published on October 31st, 2017, common La Llorona stories are found in Greek mythology, the Bible, Aztec myths, and in Europe. These stories hold similar importances and themes that different parts of the world use for their advantage. I first heard the story of La Llorona around the age of 4. It was a story that freaked me out and made me paranoid. Now that I am older, I can share this story without difficulty, but I have done more in-depth research on the Latino version of La Llorona through websites such as Legends of America and the National Museum of American History. I also use a blog post from the Ohio State University and a newspaper known as the Pueblo Chiftian. My 3 main points include the story of La Llorona, its history, and the cultural impact. To begin, I will discuss the story of La Llorona. According to an article from the Legends of America website, which was published on May 18, 2020, La Llorona was a caring woman full of life and love who married a wealthy man who lavished her with gifts and attention. However, after she bore him with 2 sons, he began to change, returning to a life of womanizing and alcohol. He no longer cared for the beautiful Maria, even talking about leaving her to marry another woman of his own wealthy class. Only to return home to visit his children, Maria felt devastated and started to feel anger towards her children. One evening, as Maria was strolling down near the river, her husband came by in a carriage with an elegant lady beside him. While ignoring Maria, he spoke to his children and then rode off. Maria went into a terrible rage. She grabbed her children and threw them into the river. While they disappeared downstream, she realized what she had done and wanted to save them, but it was too late. Maria broke down into grief, screaming and wailing into town. The beautiful La Llorona mourned all day and night. During this time, she would not eat and walked along the river in her white gown. Since she did not eat, she grew thinner and appeared taller, and eventually looked like a walking skeleton. Still a young woman, she finally died on the banks of the river. Not long after her death, her restless spirit began to appear. Her weeping and wailing became a curse of the night, and people became afraid to go out after dark. So here I have some pictures of La Llorona. As you can tell, they all have the gown in common. Some of them, they include the children that she wished to hope to find, but she didn't. Now that you know the story, you need to understand its history. As stated in a short article from the National Museum of American History, which I accessed on October 21st, 2020, La Llorona's story is a story repeated to children throughout Latin America, with numerous versions circulating Mexico and the American Southwest. She has been identified as the Aztec goddess Coralique, who was heard weeping for her Aztec children on the eve of the Spanish conquest. Some also identify La Llorona as a poor woman from Ciudad Juarez who was seen stabbing her children to death, and then she wanted to dispose of them in Rio Grande in order to win the affection of a wealthy man. And according to another legend, La Llorona is actually La Maliki, the crucial interpreter and lover of Hernan Cortés. After the fall of the Aztec capital and having born Cortés's first son, La Maliki was replaced by Cortés's first wife. Unfortunately, there is no certainty that the urban legend is based on any of these, but it is presented as having pre-Hispanic roots. So I have some pictures, La Maliki and Coralique. So now that the history is in the past, I will shift the focus onto the cultural significance. According to a blog post from the Ohio State University, which I accessed on October 21st, 2020, it is important to consider the impact La Llorona can create in society. Different variations of the story are heavily generated, and they often promote the idea of machismo, where males are seen as dominant and females are meant to respect men regardless in Latino culture. Others believe that women who are without men are dangerous and that they are no good for children, and that they should be socialized into the traditional role of being service to the male population. However, the story has been somewhat revised, and the new version is about women of Mexican descent defying traditional gender roles, and her crying is meant to symbolize children lost into assimilation, to violence and prejudice. But as also stated from a Pueblo Chiftian article from that newspaper, which was published on October 22nd, 2017, for many Mexican Americans or anyone who lives in Southwest Mexico or even parts of California, hearing La Llorona is mandatory. The impact of this legend is far-reaching and still prevalent today. Her tale was told as a way to regulate women's behaviors and to keep children away from playing near large bodies of water. To recap, you should now have a good understanding of what the urban legend of La Llorona is, the history and its cultural significance. Do not forget that the version I shared with you today is not the only one. The History Today magazine states that a version exists among Greek mythology, the Bible, Aztec myths, and in Europe. While the urban legend varies from culture to culture, the overall message stays relatively the same. As you're out and about, maybe near a river, be careful in case La Llorona appears. If you start hearing screaming and wailing, I suggest you turn around and go back to where you came from. Thank you.